so to speak. Okay, anything else?
You pointed out years ago that every step upward begins with a point of tension.
Yeah. And this is one of the things the masters can do that we don't do, is our point of tension is often originated by our soul and resisted by us. Whereas when a person becomes a master, he sees that a point of tension is needed, so he creates his own point of tension. And so he doesn't have to suffer the way that we do, because he creates his own point of tension. And that's an important principle. It's like Jesus says, you must be born again to have eternal life. Well, we're forced to be born again by being reincarnated again and again. So we're forced into it. But if we can be born again without actually being born, then that's the key to eternal life. In other words, now how can you be born again without being reincarnated? You're born again by seeing where you are in your life and then saying, well, I've gone so far, now I have to reinvent myself.
Yeah, recreate yourself.
And recreate yourself, that's a good word. So by reinventing and recreating yourself, you can be born again without having to lose your memory and just start fresh, where you're forced to be in a totally new situation. You create a new situation for yourself. And this is very difficult to do, because when we get, say, in a groove, we tend to stay there and don't see what we have to do to really take our next step. And so, for instance, some people when they retire just want to go fishing and to concerts and watch TV and just relax. Other people maybe think, well, maybe I should learn something new. And so they try to reinvent themselves. And this is somebody taking the right direction.
And this crisis, this pandemic, is a crisis of opportunity for humanity, that we should not try to go back to the way it was. Like we hear people saying, we're going to get back to the way it was. We need to get back to the future.
That reminds me of a movie.
Right.
The future, man. I agree with you, Ed. You're right on.
Well, yeah, some things we want the way they were, and some things we want changed. So that's the key. Keep the good things from the past, but always add additional things to take us into the future. Okay. We'll begin our lesson. I might add that on the video, since that's last subject's kind of would be of general interest there. We were talking about, in White Magic, we were talking about disciples and the problems the hierarchy has in working for them. And there's several different types of fears that he talks about that are have to be overcome by disciples following the path. The basic fear that is instilled in everybody that is born is geared toward the instinct of self-preservation, and has its roots, he says, in an innate fear of death. Okay. So no matter how high and holy somebody thinks they are, they have an instinct to preserve their physical well-being, to take care of the body, to make it last as long as it can and in as good a condition as it can, because basically we have an instinct within us that doesn't want to die. We don't want this physical body to die. This is something that's built into us. Now, some people have said if we could see how glorious the next life is, we'd want to commit suicide. And a lot of people that have had near-death experiences didn't want to come back. I mean, after they had the experience, it was such a blissful place that they actually did not want to come back. And so where this is hidden from most of us, we don't really want to go there. Yeah, because there's something about the way we are created that gives us a very strong instinct to preserve our life as long as we can and as good a condition as we can. And there is a lot of fear that's built around this.
That comes from the physical elemental, that vehicle which we occupy that has its own voice.
Yeah, that's the large part of it. That's certainly true. So anyway, we concentrate on care of our body, and medical advances and civilization and its comforts are motivated by this fear. So this fear has caused us to focus on medicine and make advances there. We've got all kinds of treatments, anesthetics, operations that we have today that we didn't have hundreds of years ago. And this is all geared around this preserving the health of the body and also comforts. We have, we build our homes, we have heating, uh, we have refrigerators and freezers so we can have good food. And all these are around, are motivated by this fear. He says, you you don't really think of it that way normally. You think, well, I'm motivated because I want comfort. But why do you want comfort? Because, well, you want to preserve your body because you want to preserve your body because you don't want to die. And you don't want to die because there's an instinctual fear that's built in the fiber of our physical being. And this fear actually motivates us to make our lives just as comfortable as we can make them, which is kind of interesting. Okay, the next fear, he says, is built around the instinct of sex. Most people don't think of sex related to fear, but he says it is. He says the instinct of sex has its main root in the fear of separativeness and of isolation, and in a revolt against the separative unity on the physical plane, against aloneness. Okay, so in other words, the sexual relationship is something that evolved to because of a fear of being alone. Okay, we don't want to be alone. Being completely alone is something that we fear. And this has caused us to evolve the sexual relationship, which forces us to come together. Uh, People even have sex with people they don't like sometimes. So,
Right.
because they're, it's all evolved around this instinct of not being alone. Okay, so that's an interesting take on it. I've only heard from the Tibetan here. He says this results, of course, in the propagation of the species, and so that's an interesting take he has on that. Another fear is related around the herd instinct. This is related to a fear of our safety. So we gather together in families, groups, cities, states, so we can live safely and peaceably. So the herd instinct is related to a fear of safety. And because we want to be safe, we not only want to live here and keep our life going, but we want to be able to live in peace and safety. And this causes us to have families, to gather together in groups, to build cities, communities, housing developments, uh, get a police force, uh, create the civilization that we have so that we can live in reasonable, safe circumstances. Another fear, he says, is related to self-assertion. This relates to a fear of not being recognized or appreciated, or fear of powerlessness. He says the individual asserts himself and gains his desires, which he later sacrifices for the good of the whole. Okay, we have a fear then, he says, of not being recognized and of feeling powerless. And this is something that bothers everybody one time or another. We want to be able to do a work that means something to us, that means something to other people. And we want to be able to assert ourselves and be recognized for it. And to not be able to do that, he says, there's a fear behind the powerlessness of not achieving this recognition. And this is something that a lot of people don't recognize in themselves, or maybe even deny in themselves, but it affects everybody to a degree. And I would submit that even the masters or the planetary logos wants to be recognized for wants to be recognized for his accomplishments, or at least have his accomplishments mean something. And this is very important for humanity, is that we have this strong desire to have uh, the labors and the direction we go mean something, not only to ourselves, but to others. And if it means something to others, then it makes life a lot more satisfying. And I would say that principle applies to every life in the universe to some degree and some level. And he says this motivates us eventually until we go beyond just service for self to eventually thinking of the good of the whole. He says this is where this fear will lead us to. This motivation behind this fear will lead us to wholeness rather than separativeness. The other one, the last one he talks about here, is the instinct to inquire. In its turn, it's based upon the fear of the unknown. Okay, we all have a fear of the unknown to some degree. Like death is the great unknown for the average person. He doesn't know what's going to happen there. So there's fear associated with that, largely because it's unknown. Now, you talk to somebody that's had a near-death experience and they had a really blissful encounter with wonderful beings there and everything, and had a wonderful, peaceful feeling. That fear is largely erased. So that unknown became known to them. At least they think they know. So that dissipates that fear. But we have an instinct to inquire because of a fear of the unknown. And so it's interesting that he's pointing out here how fears are powerful motivating factors for humanity. And even the fear of the unknown motivates us to inquire, to find out, to experiment, to plunge into the unknown to make it known. And so we have our present, he says, our present education and cultural systems, the entire structure of scientific investigation is all motivated by this fear the unknown. We look at the unknown and we want to make it known so that we have we can be at greater peace. Once the unknown becomes known, there's a sense of peace about it, because and then we can move on to another unknown, so to speak. There's always something unknown out there. I would guess no matter how high the lives are, whether it be planetary or solar logos, we all have what is called the ring past naught, which is the limit of our consciousness. There's a limit to everybody's consciousness, and behind that limit is the unknown. And there's a fear associated with it that has to be transcended so that we can expand our ring past naught. So our consciousness is expanded, and we are able to see with a greater vision.
So wouldn't you say, though, that our soul is operating at a much higher level of knowing than we, the instruments or the shadow, are, and that as we connect with our soul, we will overcome these fears that the soul doesn't experience?
Yeah, and that's he says this is the key to overcoming our fears and managing them is soul contact, because the soul in its realm doesn't really have any threats to its life. It's in an eternal state of being, and so many of the things that causes fears for us doesn't affect it at all. And so if we connect with the soul, there's a sense of peace in that connection that gives us more power to forge ahead. Because the thing that keeps us from moving ahead more than anything else is our fears. Fear stops a lot of people dead in their tracks. And true courage isn't not having fear, but it's facing our fears and moving ahead even though we do fear. I mean, that's what real courage is. And
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
yeah, right.
Well,
And
I'd like to mention that, we just went through about, several minutes worth of fear, and I'd like to point out that fear in and of itself is not a negative thing, because there's a higher level of fear, which would be the respect for good, orderly direction, G-O-D.
yeah, fear is just negative if it stops you in your tracks.
Right.
It's like that parable of decision. Those two guys wouldn't move ahead on the path because they were afraid, and the other two went ahead even though they were afraid. And the ones that were paralyzed by fear never went anywhere. And so that's a good point. Okay, he says the instinct of self-preservation, which is the basic fear, he says, finds its consummation in assured immortality. So he says all these fears that we have a desired end that we must achieve. And all of us have a fear of death, but this fear leads us to finally discover that we are immortal beings. And once this is discovered, that we have assured immortality, he says this fear is transcended. Now we'll still have some fear in connection with the physical body because we still want to take care of it. We don't want to get the virus, so we protect ourselves from that, and we don't want to drive over a cliff. We don't want to. So basic things, but the disciple will develop a self-assurance that things will continue after the body dies, that he is more than just the physical body. Now he says the sexual instinct, the fear behind that the end product of that is the marriage of the body and the soul. Okay, so sex is the intermingling of male and female energies, uh, whereas the higher octave of this is the marriage of the personality of the lower person, which is us here, to our souls. And when we marry our souls, then we will never feel alone again, because the soul is in connection with all the other souls. And so there's no sense of aloneness with the soul. And so that sense of aloneness, that fear of being alone, is transcended when the personality and the soul marry, and that's the consummation. The herd instinct, he says, evolves into group consciousness. So the lower person starts out by establishing friends, family, groups, and eventually this leads him to uh, group consciousness. And this also happens through the soul, because the soul is very group conscious. Okay, the instinct of self-assertion will lead to the discovery of the divine self and the establishment of the kingdom of God upon the earth. So that'll be a great day. And this is um, the kingdom of God, in other words, will manifest when we as individuals assert ourselves to try to make our lives have meaning. And when we have enough meaning in our lives and interplay with others that have meaning, the kingdom of God manifests upon the earth, because that basically that's what the kingdom of God is a world that makes sense, that has meaning behind it. And that's one of the big complaints of people about life on earth right now, is they say it doesn't have enough meaning, doesn't make enough sense, there's too much pain, there's too much of this, and there's too much unfairness. And so a lot of people complain there's just not enough sense in life on earth. But in the kingdom of God, things begin to make sense and have meaning, and this is where we want to move toward. Then the instinct of inquiry. This will lead to gaining an understanding of wisdom and the use of the intuition. So we have this fear of the unknown, and exploring the unknown, finding the unknown, leads to the development of the intuition and the development of the use of wisdom and good judgment. Okay, this is where this fear leads us to develop these things. And the use of the intuition is good. Like some scientists have pretty good intuition. Like Tesla was very intuitive. He would just have a feeling about what he was supposed to do next through using the intuition. And then when he wanted to develop an idea, he tuned in to a very high source that inspired him. And the best of the scientists are this way. The best of all people leading to developing a greater civilization use some intuition to a degree. And the disciple needs to develop intuition to the highest degree possible. The seekers, such as the people in this group, we want to use the intuition to pick up on higher principles and how we can manifest them and use them. He says, thus the fears which beset humanity, having their roots in instincts, seem nevertheless to be divine characteristics, misapplied and misused. So, in other words, fears and pain and all these things that we don't like are caused by divine characteristics that are just misused. Evil, they say, is often caused by taking something good and misusing it. Even Hitler, who is the greatest antichrist to surface in our civilization, he had an idea of good in his mind that he was trying to implement, but it was misappropriated and misapplied and misused, and so it turned into an evil. And this is a problem that we have. It's a little bit like a piano being out of tune. The piano may be perfectly good piano, but it's just out of tune. It needs to be set in tune, or it will create an annoying sound rather than a pleasant sound. And so we, as individuals, must tune ourselves for our goals so that we focus on a good and a service that will be applied appropriately. If it's not applied correctly, then we can be out of tune and create more harm than good. And so that's an important principle. Now he says, when applied correctly, to lead humanity to liberation, and even in their misapplication through the ages, humanity has been able to stimulate and move forward. So he says here that even though we're somewhat out of tune, he says we're always somewhat out of tune as we move forward. As individuals, as groups, rarely are we in perfect attunement. So it's like the Allies when they were fighting the Nazis during the war. They weren't perfect either. And they made, there were some war crimes committed on our side too. So nobody's perfect. So even though we were out of tune to some extent, Hitler and his bunch were even more out of tune. So the group that was least out of tune, fortunately, won the war. And so
yeah, we had Joe Stalin on our side.
oh yeah, he was quite out of tune, but he was more in tune with our side than Hitler was. So yeah, so he says that even though we're out of tune, we're out of focus to some degree, you just can't just stop and do nothing just because you're not perfect. He says humanity is still, the masters still prod humanity forward, even though we're imperfect as a civilization, as human beings. And this is an important point, is that we need to be able to move forward no matter what. If you don't know what to do, well, just take a step. Have you ever been in that situation? How about you, Joshua? Have you ever been at a point where you didn't know what to do, but you had to just do something?
Yeah, I guess.
But and then when you do take that step, well, you usually learn something, and so you see a little bit more. Can people here identify with that idea? How about you, Ed? You ever reach a point where you didn't know what to do, so you just force yourself to do something?
You're muted, Ed.
Well, what I do when I don't know is I be still and ask myself, what do I know? And I wait for the answer. But there are times when you just don't know, and so you have to do something. Sometimes it has to come quickly, and sometimes you have the time to be still and know.
And this is a problem with some of the New Age people, is they think they're so in tune with higher self that they always know. But if you're honest with yourself, and your soul will allow this for your own growth, is sometimes you'll reach a point where you don't know, and it seems like there's a barrier between you and your soul, because your soul isn't telling you what your next step is. You have to move ahead completely in the dark at times. How about you, Curtis? Can you identify with that?
Oh yeah, lots of times. But usually you know what your next small step might be. For me, it might be printing out some more material, getting ready in more of a preparation mode, sharpening my saw kind of thing. And then, a door will open and there'll be somebody that wants to know or that has questions, and then I'm ready. So sometimes if I don't know my next step, I just go into a preparation mode.
And sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't know that we don't know.
That's true.
And I look at these things as crossing a raging river one stone at a time. You have to know what the next stone to step on is before you take the following step.
Well,
Now,
it's like pruning
yeah.
a fruit tree. I do that in the winter professionally. And I don't know what the fifth cut is going to be, but I know what the first cut's going to be, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then it's sequential. So
Yeah, right.
it always reveals the fifth step will reveal itself if you just take care of the next step.
Now, Jill's a real sensitive person. You would think that Jill would always know what her next step is, but how about you, Jill? Have you ever reached a point where you just kind of had to guess?
Yeah, yes. There's been several times that's happened to me. I'm not going to, I'd prefer not to reveal specific details about a circumstance, but I can tell you this unequivocally: if the next step that I take turns out to be the wrong one or in the wrong direction, then I chalk that up to a learning experience, because it'll help me grow and learn what not to do the next time.
Yeah, then there's other times when your soul looks down on your life and your soul thinks, this guy's got to do this particular thing, or marry this particular person, or take this particular job. And your soul will make every attempt to send you the message, so your next step will be clear. But then other times your soul looks down and it says, well, that doesn't really matter that much. If his next step goes to the right or the left, he's going to learn either way. So I'm not going to tell him. I'm going to let him learn by his own experiences. And then we're down here and we really want to know what from our soul, maybe from God or whatever source we're trying to access. We want to know what our next step's going to be, and nothing comes. Okay, we're completely on our own, and this happens numerous times in the life of every individual. And how about you, Adam? Can you identify with that?
Not knowing quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, right. But and when you took your next step, even in the dark, did that reveal something to you?
Yeah, definitely revealed how I could have done it differently.
You
But
learned
it
what you did wrong then.
Yeah, well, but it also, I mean, it turned out to be the right step, but I didn't have to do it exactly that way. And that, in hindsight, I could have accomplished the same thing a little different way, not so dramatic. So that's, it was both rewarding and teaching at the same time.
Yeah. He says that evil is a necessary part of duality and is an illusion. He says evil is due to the wrong perception and erroneous interpretation of that which is perceived. And that true vision eliminates that which is evil. So we perceive things, and say in a courtroom is interesting. You may have 3 eyewitnesses testifying to something, and they all saw the same thing, but they'll all give a little bit different testimony of it, even though they saw exactly the same thing. And this is interesting, especially when time passes. If there's a little bit of time that has passed, their testimony will start varying more because people remember things differently. But evil is overcome by a correct interpretation of that which is perceived. Now, we see this a lot in politics. A lot of the evil in politics is from people, they see 2 sides see the same thing, but they interpret it entirely differently. Oftentimes, both sides interpret it wrong. And usually, at least one side is interpreting wrong. If they disagree, well, somebody's interpreting it with bad judgment, or maybe just bad motive. Maybe they see correctly, but they're trying to entrap their opponents, and this is happening a lot. So we must learn to perceive and then interpret correctly that which is perceived. True vision, he says, eliminates evil. I'd say in addition to true vision, we also have to have true motive, because some people see correctly but then twist things on purpose, and that's even a greater evil. But if some people want to see things right, but just haven't got the ability yet, haven't developed that objectivity enough to be able to do that. So motive is extremely important. If we have true motive and are trying to interpret correctly, we will get better at it and more accurate as we go along. He says, but what are the 2 fears with which the aspirant has particular concern? What of the fear of public opinion and the fear of failure? He says these are 2 potent factors in the life of service and hinder many. So the fear of failure and the fear of public opinion. Now, public opinion is interesting. It's an interesting thing that people fear, is that, let's say that speaking the truth about this virus, for instance, if it goes against what everybody's thinking, there's a powerful feeling out there that people pick up saying, I better go along with what everybody's saying about it, and I better be just as afraid as everybody else. But let's say inwardly you're not really afraid of the virus, but everybody else is. Well, when you're around other people, then you might act like you're afraid too, even if you aren't.
Well,
So,
people wear the masks and I don't, they look at me funny. So I go into Albertsons wearing my pest control operator's mask. It's a full chemical mask.
yeah, there's a guy walking down the street the other day, all alone, wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Just by my house. He's just walking by my house, and I thought, he's 100 yards from any other human being, and he's wearing a mask. What's that about?
Viruses are everywhere.
But so that's kind of funny. But anyway, this virus is a very interesting thing because all the nations are treating it, reacting the same, except for Sweden. Sweden is kind of bucking the system and leaving it up to the individual to do the right thing, instead of trying to enforce isolation. But outside of that, all the other nations are doing the same, and Sweden here is bucking the system, so it's getting a lot of criticism from the other nations. And the other nations are saying, hey, you're not behaving like us, you need to behave like we are. And Sweden is saying, well, our infection rate is lower in the United States, and we're we're still just because we're doing something different doesn't mean it's worse. But individuals are like this. When everybody picks up on public opinion, there's a fear of bucking the system, of going against that public opinion. But oftentimes a disciple has to stand completely alone. And this is what each disciple must learn to be able to do, to stand alone if necessary. Because when the person makes contact with the soul will not say, hey, go along with what the crowd, and that's the key to having a good life. That's not the message that you're going to get when you make a spiritual contact. You will find yourself often going against the grain. Now, some people go against the grain just because they're contrarians. Now, the contrarian is very irritating type of person that just he if you say the sky is blue, he'll say no, it's not completely blue or whatever. You know, he'll disagree with you no matter what. And we have people like this show up on our groups. We have every once in a while, and this is completely different. But when you get something from the soul, you may have to go against public opinion, but it will be not as a contrarian, but because you see a point of light that the other people are not seeing. And when this happens, this will require courage on your part.
Just a side note there, Joe, that was the labor of Hercules in Capricorn, where he had to leave the masses, the sheep, and become a goat and climb to the top of the mountain where he could see, where he had vision, and he attained a greater measure of light than the fellows around him. And it was really an extraordinary labor for him to separate himself and become an individual and self-conscious.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the fear of going against your group. Now, think of all the groups that you're associated with that you're tempted to always agree with. That can be from your spouse to your family. Think of getting together as a family reunion. You don't want to say things that's going to upset people too much, you know. Now, you always use good judgment. You don't upset people just to upset them. But if you're backed in the corner and somebody asks your opinion on something, you should give an honest opinion, even if it goes against the grain. Some people will actually just agree to be agreeable, and this doesn't really get the disciple anywhere. So the person should always be honest, but diplomatic, and not be a contrarian, but be willing to take the side of truth, even if it's unpopular. So we have pressure from our families, from our groups, churches, political parties. Uh, the media is a very powerful group thought form. And you notice that when a story or a trend or something, or even a phrase is picked up by one media or media person, that it's often picked up by all of them. Pretty soon, everybody starts. Like one that just comes to mind was when George Bush picked Cheney to be his vice president. Somebody says, well, George Bush picked Dick Cheney because he has gravitas. Now, gravitas was a word I'd never heard before. And all of a sudden, everybody uses gravitas. Oh, Dick Cheney has gravitas. He has gravitas. And every station you turn to, they were using that word gravitas. And that's just one example. And this happens in the media, that something gets planted like a seed. They all pick it up and all run with the same angle, and they all sound the same. It's an amazing thing. That's like these guys are not thinking for themselves. They're saying, well, what are other people saying? We got to say what the others are saying. And so this happens, and the disciples are immersed in this groupthink, but the soul doesn't tune into the groupthink of the personalities here on earth. It's a higher type of thought that runs contrary to the world as a whole, which brings into mind the statement of Christ, be in the world, but not of the world. And the soul is not of the world. And when you pick up from that, and if you're going to go with the soul, you have to be prepared to go against the grain. Okay, that's pretty much near the end of our time here. Any comments or questions before we sign off?
I do.
Yeah.
If you find yourself being forced to wear a mask, there's no reason why you can't turn it into something fun.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people getting creative with these masks. If you have to, now Costco now is starting tomorrow. You have to wear a mask when you go there, or else they won't even let you in. So I don't know if other businesses are going to follow suit on that or not.
That's how it is over here.
That's how it
Oh,
is in New Jersey too. You'll be turned away at any store without a mask.
Yeah, New Jersey, they have it's one of the most infected states there, so that's probably
Yeah, we're
Uh,
infected in more ways than one, that's for sure.
yeah. Now, New York City, you know, the problem in New York City, I discovered is I think they had a lot of their infections from the subway because they couldn't shut the subway down because people absolutely need it to have anything function there. So a lot of people had to take the subway. Doctors, nurses, essential workers still had to take the subway, and I think that's why New York had such a high infection rate, because a lot of people caught it on the subway, I think. But I'm not sure why they don't have a subway in New Jersey, do they?
No, they don't have a subway system to the point that
But it's
Manhattan
quite
has.
congested there. It's
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
we have 9 million people in the state, and I think New York City has that many people just in the city.
Yeah.
Well, we have a subway system that goes from New Jersey into New York.
Well, yeah, but New Jersey doesn't have one that's dedicated just to New Jersey, but you can travel to New York City from New Jersey under the Hudson River that way.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's how I get into New York a lot of the time.
The PATH train? Yeah.
yeah. There's probably a bigger danger than for New Jersey just because of that link. I bet that's part of the problem.
Well, it's several links. There's lots of traffic from New York to New Jersey through buses and cars.
Oh,
and
is there?
several subway points. It's not just one thing. There's like 2 lines that go into New York, one on the World Trade Center and one to 33rd Street.
Yep.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wonder if Michelle, London has a subway. Is the infection rate pretty high in the city of London?
I don't know. I don't watch the news.
Not much,
Uh,
huh?
Stay
Yeah.
away from all those things. I just stay in my little bubble and I'm safe and happy.
There's a lot of people take the subway there in London.
Yeah.
Is it a really big thing like New York, I wonder? Yeah.
Yeah, probably because it's so expensive living in London. So a lot of people live outside of London in cities, and so to get to London, they take the subways, the trains, and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Now is the subway still open during the pandemic then?
I don't
You don't
know.
know, you never take it, huh?
No, I don't take it. I don't leave my house. I have no reason to leave my house. So to me, it's like nothing happened. Everybody else is just going a bit crazy.
Yeah, people that are kind of homebodies, their life hasn't changed that much. Yeah. Any luck with retrieving your boy from South Africa?
If all goes well, he'll come home on the 21st of May.
Oh, okay. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Oh,
Yeah.
great.
So that's if the flight doesn't stop or have any problems or anything like that. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. Okay. Any comments, questions before we sign off?
Well, I just want to say that all of these things that we're studying are not new. There's nothing new under the sun, Horatio, so to speak. You know, all we need to know is the few basic truths that were given to us over the past 2,000 years. And now, in this changing of one age to another, we should have the accomplishment of all these things. We should be now demonstrating that to be still and know. All we need to do is go into that upper room, be still and know, and all things will be added unto you.
Well, there's one thing DK talks about is humanity has a lot of the correct ideals in their mind. We're just imperfect in manifesting these ideals. So we have to take the ideals, which is, and remember the sixth ray, which is govern the age of Pisces, focuses on the ideal. And the Christ, who is the avatar of the age of Pisces, was the ideal man. And the ideal is presented before us in the last age, and now we have to manifest these ideals in the age of Aquarius.
It's time to manifest and time to realize that this is the manifestation of these truths for us.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Well, appreciate everybody being here, and we'll have a special meeting, like I said, Tuesday morning at 4:30.
You mean Thursday, JJ, right? Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday morning. I'm sorry. Did I say what did I say?
The
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you corrected me. Thursday morning at 4:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. So we'll see some of you there that are not asleep. And we'll have our next White Magic class next Sunday at 2 p.m. all being well.
Oh, that's about the time I wake up.
Yeah, set your alarm there, Ed. Okay, well, so we will see you again soon. Good group today. Thanks.
Namaste.
bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.